the World Economic Forum Africa 2019, continuing to discuss exactly how inclusive growth and the fourth industrial revolution all come together to ensure the growth and the advancement then of the Africa story. Let's chat now to the CEO of Standard Bank Group Limited, South Africa, Mr. Lungisa Fuzile. So thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it. In the finance space, in the banking space, one might say that the best thing to just get for people is funding. Are you finding that that is the continued conversation that you need to have, considering that Standard Bank is indeed a Pan-African bank?
It is. Our continent needs investment in infrastructure, energy in particular, roads, rail, all kinds of infrastructure as a foundation for driving inclusive growth, as you were saying. And our continent does not trade enough with itself. And part of the reason why our continent doesn't trade enough with itself is because the infrastructure, which would be the basis for that, is not in a state that is supportive of that kind of trade of volumes that we would like. At the same time, trade finance itself is an opportunity for businesses like ours, but in financing trade, we would be oiling this giant that is awakening of the African economy. And we are in it. And I'm not talking exclusively Arabile, about intra-Africa trade.
Yes.
We also have to look at the opportunities between our continent and the rest of the world. For an example, you would be aware that we trade as a continent with China roughly about 147 billion US dollars worth of goods. And that's an opportunity that ought to be financed by African banks like ourselves.
Yes.
And of course, in a globalized world, in competition with institutions from around the globe.
You make note of the particular industries that need it most. How do you prioritize to find the right one? We come to discussions like WEF to find out those partners that need, but how do you then pick and say, yes, this is the development strategy we need to focus on now and go into that path?
The most optimal combination of priorities in relation to infrastructure and sectors comes about when financial institutions like ourselves and the people we have on the ground interact with governments and, of course, private sector partners on the ground. Because you will always find that in a particular country, there is always jostling and competition for resources.
Yes.
The best sequencing usually is understood when one listens carefully and engages in an iterative process with all of these parties that I've just mentioned. And out of that, of course, an institution makes its own choice. For instance, our own bank is very clear about the financing of infrastructure, especially in the energy space. We are in Mozambique with the financing of the gas and other related projects there. We are in many parts of the continent, in some instances in partnership with ICBC, just to make sure that we can mobilize resources and do more than what on our own as Standard Bank Group we're capable of doing.
Yes.
And of course, the interplay then between our own prioritization internally, interacting with the prioritization that's done by governments on the ground, private sector on the ground that needs resources from us, produces the most optimal set of priorities.
How significant is the signing of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, not just for Standard Bank, but certainly for business itself? Because yes, it's been ratified and agreed on by the countries, but now's the opportunity for businesses to get involved, surely.
Yes. Symbolically, it's a major step in the right direction. What we must never lose sight of, though, Arabile, is the fact that that's just the first step.
Yes.
Which points in the direction of appreciation by continental leaders of the importance of trade in driving inclusive growth and opening up opportunities both for business and individuals who are looking for jobs, for an example, which is an issue on our continent. However, there is a lot more that has got to then happen to actualize free trade, which means each country must look at impediments to trade, tariff and non-tariff barriers to trade, which they must remove systematically. Then such developments become contentious, because all of a sudden people realize that when you open up your market to goods from outside, it might at the same time pose a threat to jobs in your own country.
Yes.
So your question about business. So there are threats and opportunities. However, this development requires determination and staying the course, because you will not find any scientific proof that suggests that freer trade and fairer trade does not lead to better outcomes, both in terms of jobs, the ability of consumers in each jurisdiction to have access to goods of best quality at lower prices than they can produce. So, and sometimes people forget this, the very building of industries, so that you build an industrial base and be able to produce things on the back of which you can compete globally, does require that you must open up your market to industrial goods, to intermediate goods. So trade is always good. It's always beneficial. Of course, it must be fair. You cannot expose industries in one jurisdiction to competition with industries that are receiving subsidies, however masked from other jurisdictions.
Just creates an unfair sort of scenario.
Precisely.
Very finally, just as Standard Bank, as yourself as well, what is the ultimate message you're hoping to gain out of WEF Africa this year? I mean, it seems synonymous with technology, the advancement of inclusive growth and the like as well. What would you like to see as a massive sort of thread pull through by the end of the 3 days?
For me, influenced in part by a session I took part in this morning, one of the biggest opportunities that I wish people would take home coming out of this Congress is an appreciation that digitization is not the future. It is here now. Whilst in the immediate term, it would appear to be threatening jobs, it offers opportunities for different kinds of jobs, but also for the possibility to set up new industries. Of course, nothing is going to be automatic. The opportunity that digitization presents our continent to leapfrog and catch up with the rest of the world can only be capitalized on if we fix our education system throughout the value chain. And studies have shown that countries that have fixed their education systems, that have skilled their people appropriately, always stand a better chance of adopting new technologies, and therefore on the back of that, build more vibrant economies. I hope that Africans, entrepreneurs gathered here would live with a single-minded approach to what in the initial stages might appear as a threat, and see through it and grab the opportunities that it presents.
Mr. Fuzile, thank you so much for the time.
It's a great pleasure.
Really appreciate it. Lungisa Fuzile, the CEO then of Standard Bank Group South Africa, helping us unpack just not the needs and requirements of just the financial institutions, but certainly of South Africa and the continent at large. We continue to give you the latest here out of WEF Africa 2019.
WEF Africa 2019. Brought to you by Standard Bank 702 and Cape Talk. More at ewn.co.za.